Hi everybody, it's Jeremy, the Existential Wine Guy. Welcome to my Facebook, Instagram Live. It is Wine Wednesday, it is Happy Halloween, and I've got a really kind of fun and exciting show for you today, so let's get right to it. We're going to be talking about oak. We're going to be talking about how oak affects your wine, how certain barrels, what characteristics come from them, and specifically, we're going to put some American oak right side by side with French oak and see the differences that it can affect one particular style of wine. And we are going to do it with a little bit of help from my friends at New Clairvaux Vineyards. They did something really cool, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But first, because I rarely sort of talk about myself all that much, my name is Jeremy. I am the Existential Wine Guy, broadcasting live from Chez Meron, at least the kitchen of Chez Meron. And one of the things that I like to do is try to bring an experience of wine just to like to the everyday type of not person. That's not the right way to put it. I'm going to fix this real quick. There we go. That is not going very well. Let's try this again. There we go. I think we're back. Anyway, more than anything, I am a wine industry veteran who helps wineries, specifically their tasting rooms, create a better customer experience, get more wine clubs, that sort of thing. I do everything from training staff to checking out your front of house sales, your POS system, your storage system, everything that, and marketing, your social media marketing, and trying to create a better experience through that. So if you are the owner of a winery, or if you're a tasting room manager and you want to see a little oomph in your sales, I'd love to have that conversation with you. Until we do, let's talk about my friends over at New Clairvaux Vineyards. One thing that they did, somehow they had watched a previous video that I had done, and we were talking a little bit about barrels and the effect that barrels have on wine. So they called me up and said, hey, we've got this little educational game / challenge. Can we send it to you and let us know what you think of it? Absolutely. Got it just the other day and got to play around with it. Basically, what they've done is something so unique where they've taken one type of wine. In this case, it's a Napa Valley Semillon, and they've made this wine exactly the same from from the how they picked it to all the way everything until it got into the barrel. And then once it got into the barrel, they made two different versions of it. One done completely in French oak and one done completely in American oak. This is kind of really exciting because I don't get a chance to have that type of taste testing. One thing that is interesting, as you know, anyone who's gone to different tastings where they try to differentiate between or showing the difference between French and American oak, rarely do they get the same wine. Sometimes it's like a Chardonnay, one that's been oaked and one that's been unoaked, but it's really rarely the exact same grapes. In this case, they even sent over all the text information, and we see that this is the exact same wine, and just the only difference is the type of oak that it was in. So you get to see how an oak affects that particular wine. Semillon's actually a really fantastic wine. If you're not really familiar with it, it really comes from more of the south of France. It's one of the third largest in France. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful with food. So having the opportunity to taste the same wine, just created just a little bit differently, is really a great way to examine the wine and brush up on your technical skills. There are very specific things that come from French oak. There's very specific notes that come from American oak. And what's also interesting is they will differ greatly depending on about the type of wine that you put into it. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. But first, let's talk about our friends at New Clairvaux. So they sent over a box. It came with 2 bottles of wine, almost exactly identical on the label, with the exception of saying what type of oak it was done, and it's just very small on the back. So that's pretty important when you're doing this particular game. Also, they've set it up so there's actually 2 games in here. So while we don't have time today to go through an entire session of this, and also, wine, like anything else, whether you're tasting it or drinking it, it really needs to be done with your friends and, really, more people in there. But they've set this game up for you really nicely. So there is an opportunity on one side to test. You'll taste 3 wines, 2 are the same, 1 is different, and you've got to sort of figure out what notes are in what and what is different, and also try to figure out if it's French or American. And then on the opposite side, and this to me is almost even a little bit more fun. You go through and taste 1 American oak and 1 French oak wine, and it gives you sort of a palette here, and it tells you what type of notes you can expect, and then you get to actually rate what you're getting out of it. So which notes, if you're getting a stronger note of vanilla, or maybe there's a coconut note to it, how big is it on your nose, and it gives you kind of a good scale at the end to see kind of what you're picking up, and it'll also kind of give you an idea of what you probably should be looking for. When I taste, it's kind of it's a mixed bag. I always like to explore wines and get what I get from it without really worrying about too much what I'm supposed to get from it. I'm sure you've had the same experience when you walk into a tasting room and the tasting notes have very specific ideas of what is supposed to be in there. I've never really liked that. I really like the idea of kind of going in a little bit more blind and just seeing what I get from it, and then hopefully if I'm having that right experience at the tasting room, there's somebody there who's going to help guide me and kind of like let me know as I'm going through the process what I am tasting and what notes may or may not be there. So as I'm thinking about this more and more, I'm thinking that to be a good taster, you have to have a certain amount of life experience. Good wine tasters are also foodies. These are people who understand exactly or they've tasted a lot of different things. So when they get a different note or an errant note, maybe from a glass of wine or a taste of wine, it's just, they can identify it and compartmentalize it, because our brains are going to compartmentalize it anyway. And I've got a good story about that. But, if you don't know what forest floor, if you've never been camping, if you've never been to the beach, you don't know how the salt air kind of comes through. And those are notes that you might miss or just not be aware of in wine. So back in the day, I was working with a winemaker. His name is Ken Musso. He is the owner, and he's this amazing winemaker of a winery called Clairvaux Vineyard. And one of those days, he pulled me aside and he said, "Hey, taste this." He wanted me to taste something that was in the barrel. And I tasted it, and what it was an amazing Cabernet Reserve. And when I put my nose into it, the first thing that I got was like this weird sort of vegetal note and like a hint of metal, and that worries me, because those are not notes that we really want in a Cabernet Sauvignon, especially kind of a higher end reserve one. So I pulled him over and I said, "Hey, taste this. This is what I'm getting from it. Is there something wrong?" He turns to me and just like, that smile that's just a little condescending. He's like, "Jeremy, try it again." So I do. Same thing, he's looking at me. Now I'm just getting nervous. By the 3rd time I had tried it, he just looks at me and says, "Cedar, lead, pencil." And all of a sudden I had this amazing sort of paradigm shift in terms of what I was tasting, because I was not that kid who was in the back of the room in class like chewing on my pencil. That was not something that was absolutely familiar to me. However, as soon as he mentioned it, I was able to identify those notes, and then and then all of a sudden everything was just right there for me, and the previous vegetal notes just go away. All of a sudden, I'm getting that like rich note of cedar, and I can see the metallic lead that you would get from like a pencil, and I was like, where was this beforehand? This is why we taste. We have to sort of wake up our palate and learn to identify different notes, and we can't do that unless we're technically tasting on a fairly regular basis. Which brings me to my friends at New Clairvaux. Like I said earlier, they had produced this Semillon. This is a Napa Valley Semillon that has been treated, or made 2 different ways. Now, interestingly enough, when you look it up, the things that you're supposed to get from French oak are, there's a subtlety to it. Yes, there's hints of vanilla, but there's but they're much softer, and they would also be described in sort of in a texturally, like in the sort of a satiny sort of way. And when you get to American oak, you get these other kind of like sometimes spicier notes. And when I say spice, not more like oh gosh, what is it? Allspice, that sort of thing. And you'll also get like these coconut notes and things that things of that sort. It will depend on this type of wine that is in that barrel and also the toast that barrel is. For these two wines that we have, one American oak, one French oak, these are done with medium toasted and toasted head barrels on both sides. So they're about as equal as humanly possible. Now, what's interesting is the first one I ended up tasting earlier today was the American oak. And would you put your nose into it? Oh yeah, there is that sort of subtle hint of coconut. I also get a little bit of melon, and then right behind that, just like a little bit of just like an earthiness to it, and almost like concrete, that sort of note. And then when it's on your palate, or actually on your tongue, let's do that right now, just because it's been too long since I've had a sip of wine. The first thing that happens is when I first opened it up, I had a hint of effervescence, and now it's been opened up for a little while, that is sort of gone. I'm getting that that lychee almost, and almost like a hint of like acidic grapefruit with it as well. Absolutely fantastic. What's interesting is when we get into the French barrel, the Semillon changes completely. First of all, just on the tongue, it's softer, and this is a really good example of the traditional flavors, aromas, and notes that French oak is going to give. Oh, it's about time I have done this. If you're just joining me, and I see a couple of my friends out there, like About Town Debbie and Laura Schultz, always good to see you as well. John, also from New Clairvaux, they're watching and probably grading me right now. But back to this, yeah, you're right. If you're just joining me, it's Jeremy, the Existential Wine Guy, and we are talking about the differences and different effects that oak has on wine, as well as the different notes that it can impart. So getting back to the French barrel, Ami, I guess I should have said this earlier because I'm a little bit out of sorts. This is a label that New Clairvaux has put out from their winemaker, Ami Sensori. Sorry, I'm kind of butchering that. First and foremost, very often we get caught up in the differences between two different wines and what's better, what's worse, what you like. Both of these are just absolutely amazing, and I would put on my table any day of the week. They're just absolutely fantastic. This is the first offering I've tasted from the New Clairvaux guys, and I will be up visiting their winery very, very soon to get the rest of it as well. Let's taste this again real quick. So what we get from this particular wine, it's a little drier, and at the same time it's a little softer. I have to say that from my personal palate, well, both of these are great, but I'm starting to really enjoy this French oak. This is something I want to have with any fish that was on the table. I would love this like in Baja, like where you're kind of eating like street tacos, like shrimp and ceviche and things like this. This is going to be an absolutely wonderful addition to that particular meal. But let's not step away from the American oak, right? So the American oak, just a little bit more acidic, still wonderful, but these are very different wines. And it's interesting how barrels affect not just the wine, but the different styles of wine. So like what I just mentioned earlier, that when you're dealing with French oak, most often the notes that you're going to get from them are going to be these, very softer, these satinier notes. Or I guess that would be more of the texture to it. what I found is that's kind of fun in the wine world is that everything kind of has an exception to the rule. So very interestingly, like when you look at Zinfandel, using French oak and Zinfandel, you are going to get huge amounts of vanillin right on the front end of that. It will lend itself to a hintier, or a hint to more of a jammier style wine, a lot of fruit forwardness on it. And yet when you use American oak, that goes really the opposite way. That's where you're going to get those peppery and more interestingly spiced notes on the back end. So it really kind of it can kind of fool you if you're not paying attention. Because like I said, different barrels are going to affect different wines, and the barrels themselves, depending on how they're toasted, can change the effect on it. I've said this before, and I will say it again. Winemakers are modern day alchemists, and the reason that they are is there's all this science and all the things, the tools that we can use to try to predict how a wine is going to come out, and that has to be married with just experience and having a little bit of faith and understanding the how wine will age, and that all wine is a little different, and getting to that end point and seeing what you come up with and seeing if it's what you had actually intended to. It floors me every time I talk to really amazing winemakers and their take on what's going to happen as they move through the process of creating wine. It's really kind of fun. Let's get back to our friends at New Clairvaux. You can actually order this from them directly, and I would really recommend that you do. Precisely from what I said before, rarely do we get an opportunity to take a wine that it will accept the notes from the different types of barrels very traditionally. This has done everything it's supposed to do. It's gotten the notes you would absolutely expect from the French oak. It's gotten everything that you would expect from the American oak. So in terms of finding a way to train your palate and learn more about what's going on in wine and the differences along the process, this is an amazing thing. And also you get to do it with your friends. So that kind of that seals it for me, and I absolutely will. I actually have a tasting group, and we're going to get some more of this so I can open up with them and go through these games and see how you do. One thing I love about working with a tasting room, if you haven't done this is something that you can actually just do with your friends. But one thing that I absolutely love about it is you can throw curveballs at people, and rarely does everybody figure out exactly what it is. I've got people who have extraordinary palates, and sometimes you throw something at them, and you can have 5 people in the room, nobody's going to agree on what exactly type of wine it is. So it's more than anything, it's fun. It's a journey to go through wine and start tasting things and seeing how you receive those notes and see what it turns into. Like I said, your perception of a wine can change in a second. Just like it did when I was talking about Ken Musso and him schooling me on exactly what should have been there. Looks like we are coming close to the end of our time here. I wish I had a little bit more because I would have loved to have gone through the challenges live on this, but maybe we're going to have to figure something out, or maybe I'll do a completely separate video and post it on my YouTube channel and send it out that way. Yes, I've been threatening to invite people to look for my YouTube channel. Don't do it yet. I'm still building it a little bit, but I would love to see you there. A couple shout outs again, just to some people who joined up here. Again, it was Debbie, Charlie, so good to see from you. And we have a bunch of people on Instagram as well. And I just wish my vision was better because I've done a new setup and I can't see the phone. So I'll have to give a shout out to everybody there just a little bit later. Again, I'm Jeremy, the Existential Wine Guy. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm sure you're going to have questions about these wines. I'm going to post a few things on my Facebook Live, and a direct link to the New Clairvaux website because they're just doing amazing stuff up there. If I have any last minute questions, actually I don't even have time for them this time. I wish I did. I would like to know if later on in the comments I've done a slightly different setup. Let me know how you like it, or if you like the other setup better. And if there's any other subjects or things you'd like to comment on, I'd love to hear from you, and I would love to explore what you want to know about wine. Again, thank you so much. I'm Jeremy, the Existential Wine Guy, and I'll catch you next time. Ciao.